Have you ever wondered what led to the US launching airstrikes in Iraq and Syria? Let's take a step back and explore the catalyst for this dramatic response. Picture this: a quiet day in Jordan, disturbed by the ominous hum of a drone. Without warning, an attack is launched, leading to the tragic loss of 3 American soldiers. The culprit, allegedly Iran-backed militias, a shadowy presence stirring up conflict in the Middle East. These militias are no strangers to controversy. They've been fingered as the unseen enemy behind numerous attacks on Western interests. A dangerous game of cat and mouse that's been escalating for years. The drone strike in Jordan was not an isolated incident, but the latest in a series of over 165 attacks on American forces in the Middle East. Each one a calculated move in a deadly chess game by various Iranian proxy groups since the current Israel-Hamas war broke out. The tension in the Middle East is a tightly wound spring, each attack adding another coil. The drone strike in Jordan, that was the breaking point. It was a match that ignited a powder keg of frustration and determination, sparking a fire that led to a swift and decisive response from the United States. But this is more than a simple tale of cause and effect. It's a complex web of alliances and animosities, a delicate balancing act on a global stage. The US, threading a needle, is determined to deter further attacks on its troops while avoiding a full-scale conflict with Iran. A difficult task as conflicts spread involving Tehran's proxies like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthi rebels in Yemen. This drone attack in Jordan was a match that lit a powder keg, leading to a swift and decisive response from the United States. But as we'll see, this was just the beginning of a larger story, one that continues to unfold in the skies above Iraq and Syria. Following the drone strike, the US took to the skies, targeting the suspected culprits. In a swift and decisive response, the US launched airstrikes, striking a total of 85 targets linked to Iran-backed militias. The attack sites spanned across Iraq and Syria, places where these militias had dug their heels in. The operation was a meticulously planned endeavor. The aircraft used for this mission were not just any ordinary planes. They were long-range bombers, flown right from the United States, cutting through skies, oceans and continents to deliver their payload. These bombers, like the B-1, are known for their ability to deploy precision and non-precision weapons, making them a formidable force in the hands of skilled crews. The operation lasted a brief 30 minutes. The White House declared it a success, but the details about the damage and possible casualties were not immediately available. However, the Pentagon was clear in its expectation there would be casualties. The strikes were not intended to be a gentle warning, they were a stern response to a deadly provocation. The targets included 4 facilities in Syria and 3 in Iraq. Reports from security officials in Iraq hinted at damage in the city of Al-Qaim. These sites were believed to belong to various Iran-backed militias, the same groups the US holds responsible for the drone strike in Jordan. With this operation, the US sent a powerful message to its adversaries. The drone strike in Jordan was not an isolated incident. It was just one in a series of over 165 attacks on American forces in the Middle East, all traced back to Iranian proxy groups. But the US retaliatory strikes were a clear message to the perpetrators of the Jordan drone attack. Such actions will not go unpunished. The strikes were not just a retaliation, but also a stern warning. That's the message sent by the United States in the wake of the recent airstrikes in Iraq and Syria. The man at the helm, US President Joe Biden, made his stance clear. This administration will not stand idly by while Americans are harmed. The strikes, he said, demonstrate this resolve. But it wasn't just Biden echoing this stern warning. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin joined in, vowing that this attack was just the start of our response. It's a promise that the US retaliation will continue, but on America's terms, at times and places of our choosing. The United States is walking a tightrope, though. On one hand, it's aiming to deter further attacks on its troops. On the other, it's attempting to avoid sparking a full-scale conflict with Iran. This is a delicate balance, a dance of diplomacy and military might. It's a strategic game with high stakes and potentially far-reaching consequences. In the wake of the Jordan attack, this balance becomes even more critical. The US, along with regional leaders, had been working tirelessly to prevent a wider Mideast war, even as conflict spread involving Tehran's proxies, like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthi rebels in Yemen. These circumstances add complexity to the United States response. The strikes were not just about retaliation, but about sending a message. And that message is clear. Harm to Americans will not be tolerated. Yet even as this warning echoes around the world, America is also sending a second message, one of caution. The US is not looking to escalate the situation into a full-blown war. As a senior official with the Biden administration told CNN, the US will not strike inside Iran, only focusing on targets outside of the country. Striking inside Iran would be a major escalation, and officials have signaled that this is unlikely to happen. While America retaliates, it also treads cautiously, seeking to avoid a larger conflict with Iran. This is the dual message being sent. It's a warning, but also a promise of restraint. It's a retaliation, but also a call for peace. The strikes have had their immediate impact, but what does the future hold? In the aftermath of the US airstrikes, the echo of the explosions reverberates through the city of Al-Qaim. Reports of damage filter out, painting a picture of the destruction left in the wake of the bombardment. Yet, amidst the turmoil, a thread of diplomacy remains. Before the strikes were launched, the US reached out to Iraq, informing them of the impending action. Yet no such communication was extended to Iran. This strategic choice, a deliberate exclusion, speaks volumes about the current state of affairs between the two nations. However, it's important to note that the Biden administration has made a clear stance. They will not strike inside Iran. It seems that a line has been drawn in the sand, a boundary set to avoid a major escalation. The US is focusing its firepower on targets outside of Iran, aiming to deter further attacks on its troops while threading the needle of avoiding a full-scale conflict with Iran. This decision is a delicate balancing act. On one hand, there is the need to protect American soldiers, to retaliate against the harm done, and to send a clear message that such actions will not be tolerated. On the other hand, there is the understanding that a strike inside Iran could lead to a massive escalation, potentially triggering a full-scale war that could have far-reaching consequences. So, what does the future hold? The answer to that question is as elusive as the shifting sands of the Middle East. But one thing is certain. The US is committed to defending its interests and its people, yet it also understands the importance of restraint and diplomacy. As the dust settles on the US airstrikes, the world watches and waits, hoping for a peaceful resolution to this escalating conflict.